More than half of all companies globally are family-owned or operated. Family businesses contribute 70% of the world's GDP and account for 65% of jobs. Their voices are important. Their stories must be told. Brought to you by the award-winning publication, Tharawat magazine. This is the Family Business Voice with your host, Ramya El-Agami.
Our House of Spice, Sibling Dynamics and Homestyle Indian Cuisine. The daughters of Indian immigrants to England, Julia and Nadia Latif, spent their childhood in the East Anglian countryside. Their entrepreneurial venture exhibits the work ethic that defined their parents' and grandparents' struggle to raise a family in a new country. The Latif sisters had always dreamed of starting a business together. Before Our House of Spice, they both felt trapped in careers they were ambivalent towards. When they lost a close friend unexpectedly, they had a realization that many entrepreneurs share: life's too short. So they handed in their notices. Without knowing what they would do exactly, they looked to what they loved for inspiration. We spoke with Julia Latif, co-founder of Our House of Spice, to talk about how the sisters' spice mix startup came to be, what family had to do with it, and how packets of spice have changed their lives forever. Enjoy this episode with Julia. All right, so first question that I was asking myself when I saw this really nice and like sort of very serene and happy picture of you and your sister on your website, okay?
Yeah.
Because I work with my sisters too. And so I was just wondering, when you guys were growing up, did you ever think that this was going to happen?
So to be honest, we were normal sisters growing up. Because there's a 7-year age difference, I was the baby, Nadia was the middle, and then we've got an older brother. Honestly, Nadia and I weren't very close growing up at all, really. We never hated each other. We loved each other as sisters. We never really hung out, just because of the age difference. When she was going out with her friends, I was younger. I would say until I turned about 18 or something, and then we got so close, and now I'm so glad of that. But I'm kind of glad it worked out that way, because if you're so close, kind of growing up, you don't know if you drift apart. I'd never change anything. I never have thought in a million years that Nadia and I would have been running a business together.
And how did it actually start? So who had the idea, and how did you guys build Our House of Spice?
So Nadia and I had always talked about how lovely it would be to work together. We didn't know what, we didn't know anything, and we were basically in jobs that we absolutely hated. I was working for a charity, she was working in finance, and we would text each other every morning how miserable we were. And then what happened, we had a bit of a shock. So a good friend of ours had a brain aneurysm in her 40s and just literally dropped dead like that. And, when you just have one of those moments in your life and you take stock and you're like, I'm not happy. I know my sister's not happy. Life's too short. So we literally went in the next day, handed in our notice, and then thought, right, now what? What can we do? We know we want to work together. What should we do? And, Indian food is in our soul. So it just made sense to try and do something with Indian food. And then, we didn't know whether it would work. At least we tried. I think that was the worst thing, that if we didn't try, that's as good as failing, at least, we tried. So, and, that was a while ago. We haven't, luckily, touch wood, haven't looked back since. This was all in Cambridge. We tested the market, we did various events, and we just grew and developed very organically. That's really the originality of the business.
The gap in the market that you guys found, or the actual unique selling proposition of Our House of Spice. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it is that you guys address which others haven't, because of course we know the history of Indian food as such in the UK is very established and very old and stuff like that. So you did not only start your first business together, but you also potentially went into a very competitive sort of environment. So how did you guys go about like sort of differentiating yourselves from the beginning and sort of say like, what we do is really, really different?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did is we tested a lot of products. So we did curry nights, so we could speak to kind of consumers face to face. And then a lot of the feedback that we were getting, that people thought that Indian food should be either really hot, it should be quite unhealthy, be made with ghee, and we never use ghee. And they had all these kind of ideas about Indian food in their head. And I think that was quite a shock for us, because when you're growing up with something, you just take it for granted, like, mum did this, my nan did this. And then it isn't until you spoke to consumers and thought, well, then Indian food isn't like that. It's tasty and healthy and actually really easy to make if you know what you're doing, if you've got the spices or everything. So that's where we looked at. So we brought out a range of frozen ready meals so that people could just kind of use there and then. They used, local produce. We worked with game a lot, so we actually cooked squirrel. Did some squirrel pakoras back in Suffolk. So making what people knew about Indian food and kind of if I can say, trying to change it and kind of just try and tell them actually our experience of Indian food. And luckily, people were really receptive to it. And so we grew from there. So logistically, the frozen ready meal range was quite expensive. And because there was only 2 of us, we were really struggling to keep up with demand. So that's where we looked at spice kits. And because they're ambient, they last longer, that, it was they're definitely the right route. So we released these 5 kits as a tester and then just built on that.
You said the feedback was very positive from the get-go. So how did you guys go about like sort of informing your next sort of moves from that feedback? Because of course it's great, right? Like you're launching a product and everyone says it's great, but then how do you go about like, formalizing that into a proper structure? What were your first moves that made it possible for you to scale?
Well, we looked at the feedback, and then we started developing plans of kind of what dishes people would like. So regard to the spice kits, the spice kits were Nadia's idea about having something that's ambient and, long shelf life. And then it's looking at the right dishes that people would be receptive to. So from there, we had a loyal band of customers that would just follow us around the country, in East Anglia where we were. And so we asked them, because we thought, well, if you're a band of kind of group of people, you've obviously got something that you enjoy about our food. And at least it's honest feedback, because, obviously we tried a lot of recipes, some worked better than the others, but, at least you're getting honest feedback from consumers. And I think we kept that in mind every time we were doing something, just so we knew that there was a market for what we were doing.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, right? Like, so you go into this experience thinking that, you've always you and your sister, you've wanted to work together for a while. And then I imagine the reality hits of like what that actually is like. So I was just wondering, what kind of like surprises were there in store for the both of you when you were actually confronted to each other in day-to-day managing a startup, which is in itself a hugely emotionally challenging thing to do, right? Like, so, what was that like?
Absolutely. So I'm not going to pretend that everything went the way it should have done. We've had some real falls. We've had some real pitfalls. This is why I'm thankful for being in business with my sister, because I think no one can support you the way that a sibling can. Mm-hmm. She can tell what I'm thinking just by the look of my face, and vice versa. I think when you start up a business, you have these grand plans, like everybody's going to care, everybody's going to want my product because we've put our heart on it. And we know it's amazing. And then kind of day one, like 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, well, why isn't the phone ringing?
Why does nobody care?
That's all weeks ago. Why? And I think that was kind of like the harsh reality of business, of like everybody's trying to make their own way, everyone's doing their own job, and actually if you want to kind of be around, you're going to have to really fight for kind of what you want, and fight for the shelf space in a shop, or fight for consumers to come to your event. You've got really kind of, and the thing is, I think that's the way you should be, because you shouldn't get complacent about what you're doing. And I think kind of, I like the fight. I like the challenge of getting people to somewhere. So I'm glad it is that way. But at the beginning, that was really hard.
You're talking about the pitfalls, but then there's also obviously the environment, right? Like, so I think that there's the whole like how other people look at that career move that you make, and like, you know, how other people perceive that risk. I mean, what was that like for you guys when you started out? Was the environment extremely encouraging? Did you get, you know, a lot of people saying like, why would you even think of taking that kind of a risk with your career? Like, you know, what kind of feedback did you guys get, and like how did you deal with that?
Absolutely. So my parents, my family, our family, you know, obviously, they were amazing. They were always supportive, mum and dad especially, because, you know, they see everything. They see when you're kind of so low. So family, aunts, uncles, everything. My grandparents were around when we started the business as well, so they starting to see. But I would say, you know, obviously like best friends, they were always supportive, but you kind of see people that you don't see every day. And they're just quite surprised, like, oh, but you were still doing that. And it's like, and that's really frustrating, because you're putting your heart and soul, you know, obviously at the beginning you're not getting any money for it, because all the money just gets reinvested. So you're tired, you've got no money, and kind of things may not have gone the way that you thought, and then you've got someone saying that. So the thing is, I'd like to say that it changes, but you know, you still bump into people, and you know, they still say something, and it is frustrating, but you know, you just have to freeze it under the carpet. Just, you know,
being an entrepreneur with your sister,
yeah.
potentially also changes your view of your sister, of your sibling, right? Like it's a totally different relationship and stuff like that. What do you feel like, you know, you discovered about Nadia while you were working together? Like, was it like for you, like, oh, wow, I did not know she was like that, or like, I did not know that this was the way that she would want to lead? Were there any like big surprises for you, where you're like, oh, okay, this is not how I know my sister?
Yeah, I mean, at the start, when we were making plans, you know, we both have a very professional side that, you know, we want to make plans, we want to do this and that, and that takes dedication, and it takes a lot of planning, and a lot of streamlining plans and things like that. But with your sister, I'd say it was a surprise for both of us that we could kind of just switch to this professional persona, that, well, not persona, but you know, your professional self, and kind of get the job done, plan it out right, achieve what you want to achieve. But then, you know, on the flip side, you can easily, you know, when work's over, or, you know, if it's the weekend, and you can easily flip out of that and go back to sisters, and kind of like, you know, lounging around in your pajamas, and just having a cup of tea and just chatting as sisters. So I think it's important to know where the line is. You know, if you're kind of planning and everything, you know, we don't stray from that. We know kind of, you know, what we need to do, because if we don't do what we need to do, we can't carry on doing it, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, Nadia's amazing at planning and streamlining and logistics. You know, we've got very different personalities, so you know, which is good, because I think if we were both similar, we would clash. So it's worked really well.
And how do you guys divide, like, you know, the authority between you? Like, is someone the boss very clearly within our House of Spice, or is it like a very flat sort of hierarchy between the two sisters?
No, there isn't like a boss. I mean, Nadia's 7 years older than I am, so kind of she's the older sister. But I'd say in business we've got different strengths. So I take on kind of like the business development, sales, and things like that, and then Nadia would take on like the HR, the accounts, and logistics. So I think we respect that there's no boss, and we respect each other's kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've got an opinion about logistics, you know, I say, well, I think this, and Nadia would say, yeah, but we're doing this because of this. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's something that I haven't thought. So you know, we respect each other's. So there isn't, you know, a boss. Yeah, I don't think that would work. Yeah.
Let's not go there, shall we? But it's an interesting industry that you're operating in, of course, because like just to be in food, it seems it's such a huge responsibility, like, you know, bringing food to people, and that responsibility of making sure it's the right thing, and it's good for people, etc. And especially with the increased scrutiny on ingredients and sourcing, etc. So how do you guys go about like making sure that you are really a 21st century sort of like food brand? How do you ensure that along sort of your value chain? Like where is the emphasis for you guys?
So I think since we first started to where we are now, people want to know the provenance of their food, which we've thrilled about, because we love sharing our story, but also kind of physically making the kits. We get ingredients from kind of an established Indian business, so we know that the spices are high quality. When the spice kits are made, they're all batch coded, they're all traceable. Allergen wise, we take, especially kind of what's happened in the industry with allergens. I mean, we only have one product that contains an allergen, but you literally treat that ingredient like kryptonite. Like, it's away from everything. And I think you should, especially with people's lives. You've got that responsibility. You're doing a product, so that's kind of how we take it very seriously, and we speak to kind of environmental health. But I think it's important to be aware of that. People want to know where their food has come from, where is it made, and things like that.
What is sort of like the technology that has impacted your industry and as a consequence your business the most, like, in the last few years, where you're like, okay, that technology coming out or becoming available to the masses has really changed the opportunities that we have as, the House of Spice?
Yeah, so at the moment, kind of all the spice kits are hand blended. Recently, manufacturers have been able to make kind of spice kits and spice blends. Before they had, you'd have to have a massive quantity. Like, we looked into it and it was like, okay, you need to buy 43,000 kits of each. It's not doable. But now we're scaling up. So we can take on bigger orders. So because we can get the manufacturer who can make them not by the 43,000, but they can make them in a higher quantity than we can. So which means we can go after the bigger contracts. And that has been a massive impact on us, because we can just go after everything now, which is great.
So what's the next step for you guys? And you're talking about scaling up, like, you have an increased demand that you need to meet. So how are you guys going about that?
So that's the manufacturer. So we'll find the manufacturer, we'll meet with them, we'll make sure that all the recipes are our recipes are just scaled up. So, we make sure that the recipes taste exactly the same, because, they're the family recipes. They're not ours. They're not ours to change. We've got a responsibility to our family to make sure that they're the same. So by having that manufacturer, it will take an enormous pressure off us. We're working with a wholesaler at the moment. We can do more with the wholesaler. We can go after other wholesalers around the country, look at exporting. It's really literally, it will just open up everything. So very exciting times here,
We'll be checking in again in a couple of years, like, just to see how it's going, like how many more spice kits are there. Thank you very much, Julia. Honestly, this has been a lovely conversation. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for listening to the Family Business Voice. Subscribe to our channels now on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, or Spotify to be notified of our weekly episodes.